Welcome everyone to this preview of my upcoming trip to the battlefields of the Western Front in the eastern part of France. It is a huge thing for me because number one, it's my very first trip to Europe. Number two, it's my first time visiting any battlefields associated with a war that took place after the 19th century. So I'm really excited about it. You guys have been hearing me talk about it over and over again, so I'm sure you can tell how excited I am about it. And so there's a couple reasons why I wanted to make this video. Number one, because I love this community. I value this community, and I wanted to be able to share my excitement with you and share some of the details of this trip with you, because I want to keep you a part of this, because I feel like for all of you who can't go to these places, I know how much I enjoy, like my friend JD going to Normandy. I haven't been there yet, so I've lived vicariously through his videos going to Normandy until I get the chance to go to those places myself. And so I feel in part like I want to be able to bring you on this journey with me. And so I want you to share in as much of the journey as possible, and that includes planning and talking about ideas for what you'd like to see. So I want to share my excitement. I want to share kind of the big picture of what I have planned, share some of the specific video ideas that I have, but then also invite you to give me some input into what you'd like to see. And then at the end, I'm going to share some ways that you can be involved. Even while the trip is going on, you can actually get to know some of what I'm doing, get to see some of the videos even before they go live on the channel. So I'll talk about that at the very end, about ways you can get involved and ways that you can be a part of that journey. But for now, let me just give you a real quick, just big picture overview of what my week in France is going to look like. And then I'm going to just dive into some of the details and show you some of the very specific places that I'll be going to within that big picture. And then just kind of talk a little bit more from there about what you can do to get involved. All right, so first of all, I am going to be in France for 6 full days of battlefield visits. So obviously in 6 days of battlefield visits, you can't possibly see everything even on the Western Front. So there are some things that are going to be saved for a future trip. For example, the northernmost part of the Western Front, places like Ypres, Mons, some of the British battlefield areas that I won't get to. So most of it's going to center on the central and southern part of the Western Front. So I'm going to be flying into Charles de Gaulle Airport in France. I'll arrive there first thing in the morning. Have a lot that I'll have to do that first day. I'll have to get my my vaccine pass that I'll need to be able to get into places, and I think you can do that right at the airport in one of the pharmacies. So it's going to take me some time to get there, get to my rental car, all of that fun stuff. And there are specifically 5 battlefields that I'll be visiting in my 6 days. And with each of those battlefields, I will be doing kind of its own series of videos. The first places that I'll be going to, the first 2 days, will be battlefields where the Americans were involved, specifically the end stages of the German Spring Offensive, specifically Belleau Wood. Belleau Wood is really the first major combat that the Americans see, and it also happens to be one of the closest battlefields to Paris. So in my journey, that'll be the first place I go. So we'll be going to Belleau Wood. I'll show you some of the specifics after I give you this overview. My second day is going to be focused on the Second Battle of the Marne, and also what was known as the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. And those areas are kind of in the same place, and they're kind of back to back. The Second Battle of the Marne leads into the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, and so we'll be visiting places like Hill 223, which is where Alvin York receives his Medal of Honor. We'll be visiting the Lost Battalion, the hill where they were stuck and lost for a few days. We'll be visiting the places associated with the 3rd Infantry Division of the U.S. Army, who earned the nickname the Rock of the Marne. We'll definitely be visiting a bunch of the cemeteries, German, French, American, British Commonwealth, and I'll show you some of those specific ones I'll be looking at. The next 2 days are going to be spent in and around the city of Verdun, visiting the battlefield of Verdun, visiting places like Fort Douaumont, the Douaumont ossuary, some of the German fortifications. We're going to spend a good full 2 days visiting all of those sites associated with Verdun. And then the last 2 days that I'll be in France, we are going to drive up further north and spend some time visiting the battlefield of the Somme. I've been reading and studying a ton about all of these battlefields, trying to put together my research so that I can bring you as much information as possible. Now, with each of these battles, I'm not intending to try and give you a complete picture of each of those battlefields. It's just not possible in the time that I have. So I will do for each of those. So, for example, let's talk about the Somme. So for the Somme, I will do a video introduction talking about the Somme. There's a lot of great resources out there, like our friends at the Great War Channel and other places, who do a really good comprehensive look with graphics and everything at what the Battle of the Somme was all about. So I'm not going to try to recreate that. There are other places you can do that. I'll give you an introduction from the Somme battlefield about what happened there. But then what I want to do with each of these battles is, after I give you an introduction, is I want to give you snapshots, pictures. So instead of trying to cover the entire battlefield of the Somme, we're going to look at, for example, the attack on the Hawthorne Ridge Redoubt. And we'll talk about the British soldiers who were involved in that attack. We'll talk about the men who dug the mine, the explosion of that mine. We'll talk about the German infantry who was defending that position. And so, we'll give you a good look at that specific snapshot, that one location on a 20-mile-long front of what was happening there. We'll go to the Ulster Tower and we'll talk about those soldiers and what was happening there. We'll talk about what was happening with the Highlanders. We'll talk about some of the stories of that very first tank attack, which happens in September of 1916 at the Somme. Those are the kinds of things I want to do. When I go to the cemeteries, we'll try to find some of the soldiers who are buried in those cemeteries and tell their stories in the context of also telling the story of the cemetery itself. So that's what I want to do. I want to give you snapshots. I want to give you pictures. I want to get to the human interest stories. And that's where you come in. I want to hear some of your stories. What story would you love to see me cover from those places I've just talked about? So let me give you some of the ideas, some of the specific videos I'm planning on talking about when I go to those. But first, I want to show you some of the specific places using Google Earth. Just show you some of the places I'll be visiting associated with each of these sites. All right, so day one, just kind of looking at where we're going to be. These are some of the things we're going to be doing. Obviously, Belleau Wood's got a lot to see. I'm told that Belleau Wood's about the closest thing that you'll find in France to a battlefield that's set up like the American battlefields, like a Gettysburg or Antietam or Chickamauga here in the States, where you've got monuments, you've got things explaining what happened and where and stuff like that. And so you've got the Aisne-Marne American Cemetery, which is right there. Belleau Wood's right here, the Marine Monument, which was made by Felix de Weldon, who's the same guy who made the Marine Corps Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, as well as the monument to Richard Kirkland, who was the Angel of Marie's Heights at Fredericksburg, and a bunch of others. You've got a bunch of other things to be seen there. There's the fountain that Marines will go to and drink from. We'll talk about the story of how the Marines got the name Devil Dogs, which wasn't necessarily at Belleau Wood, but came earlier. We'll zip over to Chateau Thierry and see the big American monument there. We'll visit the town a little bit. Here's the Marne River. We'll talk about the 3rd Infantry Division, who made their stand there and earned that name, the Rock of the Marne. There'll be some other places that we'll see in the midst of all of that. I'll probably be staying somewhere in that area that night, because then on day 2 is when we're going to get to places like Hill 223, which is where Alvin York received his Medal of Honor, and that's over here further on the other side of Rheims. There's Hill 223 right there, and there is some stuff to be seen. It's only a few miles away from where the Lost Battalion monument is, which is very near to there. So we'll be talking about Hill 223 and the Lost Battalion. That's all part of that offensive known as the Meuse-Argonne offensive, and we'll be talking about some of those stories. We'll visit the Oise-Ain cemetery, the American cemetery, which is a huge cemetery, and there's a lot of stories to be told there. From there, we'll go to Verdun. We're going to be visiting, like I mentioned already, a bunch of places associated with Verdun. I'll give you some of the specific places that I plan on visiting when I'm there. But Verdun's not very far away. All of these places are pretty close until I go from Verdun to drive up to the Somme, which is way over in this area here. So here's Paris here. Belleau Woods kind of in this area. You drive up through Rheims. And then you get over to Verdun out here, and you're not too far away from the German border at that point. And originally my hope was that I would go up into Luxembourg, visit some World War II sites, the Luxembourg Cemetery, but I think that's just going to have to wait for another trip because I really want to focus this all on World War I. So I'll spend a couple of nights there in Verdun, see everything that I can possibly see associated with that. And then we're going to go up here, and I'm really, really excited about the last couple of days because I'm going to spend 3 nights at this really cool little town, and it might take me a minute to find it. I know it's up here near Albert. Yeah, here we go. So right up here is this little village, and I don't even know for sure how to pronounce it, Auchenvilliers, something like that. But right here, I got in contact with this lady who runs a bed and breakfast right there. And they're English speaking. In fact, I think the sign's even in English. Let me show it to you here because I'm super excited that I stumbled across a website, and somebody on this website recommended this place. It's this place right here. It's got the only intact basement from that village, from the Battle of the Somme, and this village was really at the center of the Battle of the Somme. As you can see here, right outside the village, a walking distance away, you've got the Newfoundland Park Visitor Center. You've got Beaumont Hamel. You've got the Sunken Lane. You have the crater that was exploded at the, as I mentioned earlier, the Hawthorne Ridge crater. There was video that was shot that I'm going to talk about in that sunken lane of men 20 minutes before they went up and over and into the Battle of the Somme. So it's right there on the battlefield of the Somme, and I'm going to be staying there for 3 nights, and we're going to go to all of the Somme associated sites that I can. And then I'll be driving home, or driving back to the airport, driving back to the airport and flying home from there. So let me give you some of the specific videos that I plan to make. I'm still working on this, and I'm going to be doing a lot more. My hope is 30 videos worth of content from my 6 days there. I won't know until I get there exactly how much I'll end up making. All right, so this is just my working document that I've been using to kind of brainstorm my video ideas. So I wanted to show you a few of the ideas I'm working on. When I was talking to Indy Nidell and I asked him about some things that he would highly recommend from his visits to the World War I battlefields, the very first thing he mentioned was the village of Fleury, which he did a video on, which is one of the what are known as the villages that died for France. These are villages that no longer exist because they were basically blown out of existence and completely destroyed during World War I, but they still exist as political entities. They still have mayors like Fleury does, and you can go there and actually see there's markers to each of the homes that were there, and you can actually see it's like a ghost town. And they recently found a couple of dozen bodies there, and you can go to that site to see where they had found the bodies when a tree fell over and kind of pulled up the roots and the bodies with it. So we're going to take a look at Fleury. We're going to do a video focused on the Douaumont ossuary and the cemetery and what happened to the dead of Verdun specifically. And like I said, the plan is these will each be kind of independent series. So there'll be a whole series of videos on Verdun. There'll be a whole series of videos on the Somme. And we'll kind of break them down that way and do them in order. So that'll be a part of that series. We'll do a video, like I mentioned, on the Devil Dogs, how the Marines got that name, and how they kind of earned that title, even though they already had the name, at the Battle of Belleau Wood. We'll talk about Belleau Wood from the German perspective, including a visit to the German cemetery and the story of some of those soldiers as well. Because that's one of the cool things that you have here, is that in some places you actually have the dead of both sides buried in the same cemetery, which is really, really unique and not something that you typically get to see in battlefields here in the U.S. We'll look at Fort Douaumont. We're going to go to the site where Quentin Roosevelt, who was the son of former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, was shot down and initially buried before he was moved to the Normandy American Cemetery and buried next to his brother there. We're going to talk about that first tank attack, which took place at the Somme. We'll talk about the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and its cemeteries. There are nearly 3,000 British Commonwealth cemeteries on the Western Front. A lot of them only have a couple of dozen graves in them. We're going to visit a number of those, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Like I said, we're going to talk about the Rock of the Marne, the 3rd Infantry Division. I had a couple of uncles who were in the 4th Infantry Regiment, which was a part of the 3rd ID, and they were wounded in the Meuse-Argonne offensive on October 4th of 1918. We'll tell the story of the Lost Battalion and of Alvin York, as I already mentioned. We'll go to the Meuse-Argonne Cemetery, talk about some of those stories, including Corporal Freddie Stowers, who just received his Medal of Honor. He was an African-American soldier who got overlooked and initially only given the Distinguished Service Cross, and he was given the Medal of Honor by President George H.W. Bush. It was presented posthumously to his sisters right around 1990 or so. I've already mentioned the Hawthorne Ridge mine and attack. We're going to visit the site where the Red Baron was shot down and tell that story. That's near the Somme battlefield. We're going to talk a little bit about the ordnance, the weapons, the gas that were left behind and are still found regularly to this day. We might, if we get lucky, even see some of the spots where that stuff's left on the side of the road for the French army to come and collect. I won't touch any, of course, but I know that's a big, big deal to this day over there. We're going to talk about the PALS battalions at the Somme. Those are just some of the ideas that I have. There are going to be a lot more videos than that. But if you have a specific story, a specific unit, a specific soldier, a specific part of a battlefield that you want to make sure that I cover, let me know. All right, with that in mind, there's one last thing I promised you that I want to talk about real quick. All right, so how can you be involved? How can you join me on the journey even while it's still happening? Well, number one, you see on every one of my reaction videos, there are links to different things, and one of those accounts is my Instagram account. I will absolutely be posting a ton of pictures from the sites of the battlefields during my week that I'm there. And the week that I'm going to be there is the first week of February. I'm flying out, I think it's January 31st I'm flying out, so I'll be arriving in France on February 1st. So that whole week that I'm there, I will be posting a ton of pictures on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. It's free. You can do that, and you'll be able to see plenty of things that I post, not only from that battlefield, but anytime I visit historic sites, and occasionally some kind of family stuff and personal stuff that I post on there as well. So that's the first thing. Number two, how can you support what I'm doing and get to see even more? Patreon is the best way to do that. Also, our membership on YouTube. But Patreon, I really encourage you to do Patreon because there's a lot more perks I can offer on Patreon that I can't offer on the membership here on YouTube. And YouTube takes a big chunk of it as well. So on Patreon, we don't have that problem. In Patreon, I can make you able to get things like mugs and T-shirts and hoodies and things like that. When you've been a patron at a certain level for 3 months, Patreon will automatically send you merch, and I'm updating the merch all the time so that if you've been a patron for a long time, you'll receive additional merch down the road. But I will be posting raw video every night when I get into my hotel while I'm there. So the first day when I'm at Belleau Wood, I'm going to upload some of my videos, my raw, unedited videos from Belleau Wood, and make those available to our patrons and to our YouTube members to see. So even if you come in at the very lowest amount, which is like $1 or $2 a month, you'll be able to see all of that stuff, and you'll be supporting future trips like this because the money that I raise from Patreon goes directly into my account for trips like this. So when I go to places like the UK, when I go to Normandy later this year, you'll be helping make that possible. And the more money we can raise, the more support we can get from our now over 300 patrons will make more of those trips possible. And I will try to include you on as much of those journeys as I possibly can. So with all of that said, thank you in advance for making this possible. Your support of this channel, every time you let an ad run on a video, every time you hit like, every time you leave a comment, your support of this channel is what has made this trip possible. This is my passion, is bringing history to you firsthand like this. So I'm excited to be able to do it. I'm excited to be able to bring you along for that journey. Let me know your ideas in the comment section below of things you'd like to see. I'm still planning the trip. I'm spending 2-3 hours a night working on my research, working on the details of what it is I want to do while I'm there so I can be the best prepared I can and make the most of those 6 days. Thanks a lot. We'll see you again real soon.